Yeah. How could we have been bumping around without sight for thousands or millions of years if we've evolved, when really it needed to be functioning from the word go?
Well, yes, all right, I will answer that question. Certainly, you're absolutely right. The eye is a most remarkable organ, and it does the same sorts of things that these television cameras do. It does instant focusing. It does instant stopping down with the iris diaphragm. It's got full colour, three colour vision, just like modern televisions have, and it is a remarkably beautiful. It's not totally flawless. There are interesting flaws, interesting imperfections, which actually are revealing. Nevertheless, it does work very well, and an engineer would give it somewhat high marks for being well, quote, designed. Now, you raise the question, doesn't it all have to be working before it'll work, it's any good? How could we bump along for millions of years with only half an eye? That's a bit of a fallacy, because actually only a quarter of an eye, only a hundredth of an eye is better than nothing. You can make a slowly climbing ramp of improvement from just the very rudiments of vision, just say being able to tell the difference between light and shade, nothing more than that, right up to the perfection of a human eye or the eye of a hawk, say. And in order for evolution to explain that, all we need is that there should be a ramp of improvement where every step, a hundredth of an eye, 200ths of an eye, 300ths of an eye, etc., 50% of an eye, 51% of an eye, each step has got to be an improvement on the one that went before. And it's easy to see why that would be. You start by being able to tell whether there's a shadow, whether it's night or day. Shadow's useful. That could be a predator moving overhead in the sea. Night or day is obviously useful for all sorts of purposes. Then you could imagine a cup. Instead of just having a flat sheet of light-sensitive cells, the edges turn up into a cup. Now, the cup means that if there's light coming from that direction, it hits that part of the eye. If there's light coming from that direction, it hits that part of the eye. So already the animal can tell the direction from which light is coming and the direction from which a shadow is coming. So we haven't got an image yet. All we've got is the direction of light. Now the cup can steadily and slowly over evolutionary time close over until you end up with a little hole at the top. And the little hole at the top, the same principles working all the way, that light coming from that direction hits that part of the retina, and from that direction hits this part of the retina. But because there's a hole, it's rather more precisely, not exactly focused, but light from there hits there, light from there hits there, light from there hits there, because it's got to get through the hole. We're moving towards a pinhole camera. Now, a pinhole camera, if you make the hole small enough, and remember we're having a smooth gradient of closing up the hole, if you make the hole small enough, then it makes a sharp, focused image. The trouble with a pinhole camera is that the image is very dim because very little light can get through the pinhole. What you need is a lens, because what a lens does is gather light from different directions and focus it on a point. Instead of it having to go right through the middle of the hole, it can be gathered from a wider range of sources. Now, a lens is not difficult to arrange. Any old chunk of transparent gubbins will do the job better than a pinhole. So once again, we've got a slow, gradual improvement. Any old lump of gubbins, transparent, is better than nothing, and then the lens simply improves its shape gradually, 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 gradually. It's got to be gradually. Every step has got to be a slight improvement over the previous one. You get a lens.
Can I just ask you though, Richard?
Yes.
How long did this process take?
Well, that's very interesting. I mean, we've got hundreds of millions of years to play with, because that's what geological time gives us. I mean, we've got maybe 1 billion years since the first focusing eye appeared.
What about the trilobite?
Trilobites have very beautiful eyes.
Very, very clever. I mean, it's amazing.
They have compound eyes, which is what modern insects and crustaceans have.
But the trilobite has, in the fossil record, is exactly the same today as it was, or in that sense, it didn't evolve. It had
well,
had those lenses.
Trilobites today.
No, I mean, but it had the lens mechanism, which is
no,
quite powerful.
Well, trilobites have compound eyes, which is a very different principle and very interesting principle. It doesn't focus quite as sharp an image as our eyes do, but it is a very beautiful thing. And trilobites do go back hundreds of millions of years, 500 million years, 500 million years. It must have taken some time before trilobites came on the scene, but even trilobites are relatively recent compared to the age of the Earth, which is 4.5 billion years old.
All right. Is that there is an email that came in with regards to the eye, which I'd like to read, because
yes.
it's quite intelligently written. In Richard's book, The Greatest Show on Earth, and he gives the pages, etc., he claims the retina could not have been designed, as creationists say, because the photoreceptors are at the back rather than the front. So it is back to front. And it was a fact, he said, if it was created, it was the design of an idiot. Just stop there. Recent research has shown that there are cells in the retina that guide light to the photoreceptors and refocus it. The scientists who did this research described the light-guiding cells in the retina structure with the words optimal design for improving the sharpness of images, and that's from Physical Review letters, etc., etc. Will Richard admit he is wrong, since he is not an expert on optics and the researchers are?
Well, no, I will not admit I'm wrong. This is a very interesting case. The retina is back to front. The retina of the vertebrate eye is back to front, in the sense that the light-sensitive cells are pointing away from the light. Now, the light-sensitive cells are connected to the brain via nerves, and any sensible designer would have had the nerves behind the light-sensitive cells, which is in fact the way they are in mollusks, for example, octopuses, which have rather good eyes, rather like ours, with the difference being that the light-sensitive cells point towards the light, and the wires connecting it to the brain lead backwards to the brain, which is the sensible way to do it. Now, the vertebrate eye is back to front, so that the wires that connect the light-sensitive cells to the brain are running along the front of the retina. That means that the light has to penetrate this forest of wires, nerves, before it hits the light-sensitive cells, which are facing backwards. Now, it's very easy to see why this happened. It happened for historical reasons, and there's no doubt about that. Now, it is, of course, true that humans, for example, and I mentioned hawks before, see much better than octopuses. So in spite of the fact that our eye has this design flaw, we have better eyes because natural selection comes along afterwards and cleans up after the original mess that was made by this fundamental design flaw. Natural selection came along afterwards and made all sorts of little titivations which have the effect of giving us really rather good vision. And that happens again and again. It's very interesting that you get a bungle to begin with, and then rather than correct the bungle, what natural selection does is to come along and make little titivations, little tinkerings, which sort of make up for the mistake. And that's a very interesting phenomenon.